All right, this is the last section for Module B. We're going to revisit order of operations, and this time we're going to talk about order of operations with signed numbers. This comes from section 9.4 of your textbook. So let's just recall what we mean by order of operations. Remember that we can use the acronym PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or PEMDAS. This stands for parentheses. We want to simplify inside. We want to be very careful when we talk about parentheses because when we talk about signed numbers, quite often we just use parentheses to separate a negative sign from an operation. So remember that we want to simplify inside. That means perform any operations that are inside parentheses, numerators, denominators, square roots, and again this list will also get longer. Step 2, we want to simplify any exponents. This also includes square roots. Step 3, we have multiply and divide from left to right. Remember, this one is very important. Multiplication and division must be done from left to right. And step 4, we want to do our adding and subtractings. And it is recommended that you do this from left to right, but remember that if you treat the minus sign as a sign, not an operation, then basically everything is being added together and you can use the commutative and the associative rules for this. All right, so let's go ahead and do a bunch of examples and see how we do. So the trickiest part about working with order of operations is you do need to remember all of your rules that we've talked about on top of the actual order that we need to do these in. So if we look at example A, just like I did before, I'm going to put my little key off to the side. So the first thing I want to do is I want to simplify parentheses. We do have a thing that counts as parentheses here. I can simplify -5 plus 3. I'm going to bring down my 2 and my 40 and my divide. We are talking about adding sign numbers, so we want to know, do we have same signs or different signs? We have different signs, so we are going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. We should get -2. That takes care of parentheses. We have no exponents. And so now I want to do any multiplications and divisions. We do have a division. We have 40 divided by -2. We're going to divide. We have one negative sign that we keep, so we get 2 plus -20. If you want, you can also write this as 2 minus 20. It's up to you if you are comfortable doing that. Either way, from there, when we go ahead and combine, 2 and -20 have different signs. So we are going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. We get -18 for our final answer. All right, let's keep going. Let's look at example B. Example B, we have -5 times 5 minus 15 plus 5. So one thing to note on this problem is we do have parentheses, but we only have one thing here that counts as parentheses, and it's the 15 plus 5. These parentheses just signify multiplication. I cannot simplify inside. So we get -5 times 5, I'm going to bring that down, minus 15 plus 5 is 20. Minus 20 in parentheses is the same thing as just minus 20. So if you want to clear your parentheses, you can go ahead and get rid of them. All right, that takes care of my parentheses. We have no exponents. We do have some multiplication. So if we go ahead and multiply negative 5 times 5, I get 5 times 5 is 25. I have one negative. I'm going to keep it. And so we have negative 25 minus 20. From there, I want to combine. So negative 25 and negative 20 have same signs. So we are going to add and keep the sign. Our final answer is negative 45. All right, let's come down to example C. We start with parentheses. We have two sets of parentheses here that count as parentheses. The first one, negative 24 divided by 2. 24 divided by 2 is 12. We have one negative sign, so I'm going to keep it. And 15 minus 3, we have different signs, so we're going to subtract. Keep the sign of the larger number. We get 12. And finally, that takes my parentheses. We have no exponents. We have no other multiplications or divisions. And so now if we add negative 12 plus 12, we get 0. All right, let's keep it going. Example D. We want to start with our parentheses. We have two sets of parentheses here, so I'm going to simplify both of them at the same time. We get negative 3. 2 minus 8, we have different signs, so we're going to subtract. Keep the sign of the larger number. We get negative 6. Minus 5 times 4 minus 3 is 1. We have no exponents. Now let's go ahead and take care of our multiplications and divisions. We get negative 3 and negative 6. 3 times 6 is 18, and my negatives cancel out, so we get positive 18. Minus 5 times 1 is 5. 18 minus 5 is 13. All right, let's keep it going. Example E. We start with our parentheses. So we get 6 minus 2 plus 7 is 9. I can get rid of my parentheses there. Divided by negative 4 plus 1. We have different signs, so we're going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. If you want, you can get rid of the parentheses, but for me, I always like having negative numbers inside parentheses so that I don't lose my negative in my division sign. All right, so let's go ahead and keep going. We have no exponents. So we want to take care of divisions. Now this, we can actually do this two ways. We can think of this as 6 minus 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. Or the other way that you can think about this is you can go ahead and think of it as a negative 9. But just remember, this is 6 minus. This is a subtraction. So just remember that subtraction can turn into addition, cannot turn into a multiplication or something like that. So if we do this, we need to rewrite it as -9 divided by -3 is plus 3. This is doing it in one step, whereas if you just do 9 divided by -3, it happens in 2 steps. We get 6 minus -3 becomes plus 3. And either way, we get 6 plus 3 is 9. So it's up to you in terms of whether you want to do this in 1 or 2 steps. And it's all about how comfortable you are with negatives. If you're not comfortable with negatives, then I recommend doing it in 2 steps. Just do 9 divided by -3 instead of treating it as a -9. All right, let's try some more. Example F. We're going to start getting some exponents involved in here. So example F, do we have anything that counts as parentheses? And the answer is no. If you look at these sets of parentheses, inside -4 cannot be simplified further. -3 cannot be simplified further. So we do not have a parentheses step. We do have exponents though. And we get 6 squared is equal to 36. And I'm going to bring down my -4 and my -3. Now be careful because this is kind of a trick question. Remember that you do need to do your multiplications and divisions from left to right. So this one, since division is first, I want to divide first. We get 36 divided by -4 is -9. Times -3. 9 times 3 is 27. And our negatives cancel, so we get positive 27. All right, let's try a couple more. Let's look at example G. Now be very careful when you have negatives inside parentheses and you're raising them to exponents. So let's go ahead and see what happens when we do this. -4 squared is -4 times -4. 4 times 4 is 16, and we do get our negatives cancel. I'm so sorry, I should have done my parentheses first. As all of these are disjoint, we can do them at the same time. Now, when we get to -3 squared, be careful because the negative is not inside parentheses on this. This is minus 3 times 3, and 3 times 3 is just 9. So make sure that you're not squaring the negative on this one. It is not something that we really cover a lot in this class, but you will see it in the next one. Either way, we get -3 squared is 9. And I can do my 5 minus 2, which is 3. So since all of these things were disjoint, we can go ahead and combine them. We can do them simultaneously. All right, the next thing we want to do is our multiplications and divisions. 9 times 3 is 27. I'm going to keep my minus sign. And then finally, additions and subtractions. 16 minus 27, we have different signs. So we're going to subtract, keep the sign of the larger number, and we get -11. All right, let's keep going. Let's look at example H. I'll try to be better about not combining steps on this one. Okay, so we want to start with parentheses. -3, I cannot simplify that, so we're going to leave it alone for now. But I can do 3 minus 9. 3 minus 9 is -6. We have 3 and -9, different signs, so we're going to subtract, keep the sign of the larger number. Okay, now we can take care of our exponents. So if we look at the first one, be very careful because I've noticed some mistakes on the homework quizzes and test on this one, is write it out in expanded form and compute it. So we get -3 times -3 is 9, and 9 times -3 is -27. What about -6 squared? This is inside parentheses. I am squaring the whole thing. We get 6 times 6 is 36. My negatives cancel out. And so we do get positive 36. All right, so that took care of parentheses and exponents. We don't have any multiplications or divisions. And so now we want to go ahead and add. -27 and 36 have different signs, so we are going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number, which is the 36. So our answer will be +9. All right, last one for this slide. Example I. We don't have any parentheses. We're going to start with exponents. We get 2 cubed. 2 times 2 is 4. Times 2 is 8. Minus 3 times 3 is 9. Takes care of our exponents. We don't have any multiply or divide, and so we are left with our additions and subtractions. So +8 and -9 have different signs. We're going to subtract, keep the sign of the larger number, and we get -1. Okay, that takes care of those. We got a couple more to look at. And the last ones that I want to look at are problems that involve the fraction bar or the division bar. And these are examples of parentheses that don't look like parentheses. It's our first example that we have. And so when we look at these problems, the first thing that we want to do is we want to simplify the numerator, simplify the denominator, and then we're going to bring it together as one problem. So let's look at example J. So what we're going to do is inside numerators and inside denominators, we're still going to follow our order of operations. So the first thing in the numerator, what can we do? The first thing I can do is my exponent. 2 cubed. We get 2 times 2 is 4. Times 2 is 8. And if you want, you can go down to the bottom and say, okay, what can we do? Well, I can combine my negative 10 and my negative 6. If we combine that, we get negative 16 plus 8. So this is kind of a multitasking. You kind of just go back and forth between numerator and denominator until you need to bring it together into one problem to look at as one problem. So now if we go back to our numerator, what's the next thing I can do? Next thing I can do is multiply. So we get negative 3 times 8 is negative 24. And what's the next thing I can do on the bottom? We can combine. Negative 16 and positive 8, these have different signs. So we are going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. Once we've simplified the numerator and simplified the denominator, we can now bring it together as one problem. So negative 24 divided by negative 8. 24 divided by 8 is 3. My negatives cancel, and so that is my final answer, 3. All right, let's look at example K. All right, the first thing, let's start with the numerator. Negative 10 times negative 5. If we multiply that, 10 times 5 is 50. And my negatives cancel. On the bottom, we can divide. Negative 6 divided by 3. Remember, we want to do multiplications and divisions from left to right. So we get negative 2 times 5. All right, numerator is simplified already, so we're going to go ahead and just leave it as a 50. And in the bottom, we get negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. We can now divide. 50 divided by negative 10 is negative 5. And you're done. All right, let's come over to example L. Now, if you are not comfortable with going back and forth, then you can also just do each one separately. So let's just work on the numerator first. First thing I want to do is divide. We get 18 divided by negative 2 is negative 9. You can either write this as 6 plus negative 9 or 6 minus 9. Either way would be considered acceptable. And now if we go ahead and simplify this, positive 6 and negative 9 have different signs, so we're going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. So we get negative 3 is our top. So now let's work on the denominator. The denominator, we want to start with parentheses. We get 1 minus 10 is negative 9. And if we divide by 3, we get negative 3. So our denominator is negative 3. And now if we bring this together, we get negative 3 divided by negative 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. Our negatives cancel, and so our final answer is positive 1. So this is another way that you can do it if you struggle to multitask. Okay, is just work on one at a time. All right, let's go ahead and look at our last example for this section. All right, let's start with the numerator. I'm going to do each one separately again, just for those of you that prefer that. All right, starting with exponents. We have 6 squared, which is the same thing as 6 times 6, that is 36, minus 3 squared, 3 times 3 is 9, and we bring down our 4. Our next step is to multiply, so we're going to get 36 minus 9 times 4 is 36, and 36 minus 36 is 0. All right, our denominator. For our denominator, the first thing we want to do is simplify the parentheses. 3 minus 7, we have positive 3 and negative 7. We want to subtract. Keep the sign of the larger number. All right, negative 4 squared. This is negative 4 times negative 4. 4 times 4 is 16, and our negatives cancel. So we get 5 plus 16. And 5 plus 16 is 21. So we get 0 over 21. We do need to simplify this. Our 0 is on the top. That is allowed. And so this is actually equal to 0. Remember that it's only when the 0 is on the bottom that we have issues. Okay. All right, so that takes care of B.5. Again, make sure that you're taking your time on this homework assignment and that you're doing every single step that needs to be done. Try not to multitask too much. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. That will be it for Module B. So we have a quiz that will be posted, and we will have our module exam coming up. The next module that we're going to be looking at is going to be everybody's favorite. Our next one is going to be fractions. So make sure that you watch the videos for that and that you take your time on it. All right, I will see you again shortly.